Hey, what's up everybody? It's your mortgage expert, Brian McCauley here. So you're looking to buy a house in Dallas, Texas, but you're not really sure if the timing is right and you're thinking about continuing to rent? Stick around. In this video, I'm gonna teach you why renting is bad for your wealth. So listen, the state of Texas and the city of Dallas are doing great, specific to the housing market. And during this inflation bubble, there are a lot of people out there that are interested in buying a house, but they're thinking, hey Brian, prices are just too high. There's not enough inventory, I don't love it. And interest rates are not ideal. I think I'm just going to rent until things cool off or things get better. So I wanna stop you right there. Things are not going to cool off, number one. Home prices are pretty high and stable, which is great. There's been very little, if any, correction. Interest rates aren't ideal, but I wanna talk about why renting is bad for your wealth. So too many times I see people get confused when they're a renter and they have a small box of thinking, okay? Wealth creation is a huge box. Buying a house is a huge box, and there's all these other things that you need to be aware of as a renter and a potential homeowner, but you're not. So today I'm gonna show you why you have to think different and be different in order to earn different, in order to have different. 9 times out of 10, the first thought that someone has when they're buying a house is, hey, I'm paying $3,000 a month in rent. I want to pay $3,000 a month as a mortgage, and my payments are apples to apples. What price point does that put me in at, 5% down? And that would probably be somewhere around the $400,000 range. So I will tell you, first and foremost, rent is extremely expensive, regardless if you are paying $3,000 a month, $2,000 a month, $10,000 a month. It is a bad formula for wealth creation. As inflation continues to rise and things get more and more expensive, here's the deal. It's costing these investors more money to buy these properties, but ultimately the person that ends up absorbing all the cost is you, the consumer. Because when the investor has to pay more, the financial institution has to pay more, they're not gonna take the loss, they're just gonna pass it on to you. So if there's a $300 or $400 a month increase every single year on rent, you're gonna absorb it. So not only is it a waste now, you're just gonna pay more money for it in the future and continue to waste. So there's another video that I've got coming out that I'm gonna go through a total cost analysis. I'm gonna go through wealth creation. I'm gonna go to net wealth of a renter versus a homeowner in a 5 to 10 year plan. I'm gonna also talk about tax deductions. And so what I'm gonna do is unpack that big box for you guys on a round 2. But today, I want you to think about this as a renter out there. $3,000 in rent, $3,000 in a home loan. So in theory, when you cut the check, they are the same in the payment. However, that rent is 100% as far as the rate is concerned and goes totally out the window. It doesn't pay down any principal. You get 0 tax deductions, and the asset that you live in, either the apartment, condo, or house, is going up in value over time, but the owner of that property gets the benefit from you paying down the principal, the property appreciation, and the tax benefits on the back end, whether it's property taxes, income taxes, there's a whole host of stuff. But from a renter's standpoint, you have to remember that it's not always just about payment to payment. The other component is, if you look at tax law, full disclosure, I'm not an accountant, but specific to mortgages, $3,000 rent, $3,000 on the home loan, you get 0 tax deductions here. Maybe you get a standard deduction of 12.5 or something, depending upon your situation, single, married. So after the deduction, it may go to $100. When it comes to tax incentives and tax deductions on a home loan, you get to deduct all the interest, and you get to deduct up to $10,000 of the property taxes. So this $3,000 a month rent after maybe a standard deduction would be equivalent to $2,900. The $3,000 mortgage on this side after all the deductions are probably equivalent to about $25. So you're actually saving yourself $400 a month. So that's the first thing, is if you're gonna compare the payment to payment, don't. But if you're going to do the 2 things behind that, tax deductions, right? After all, it's all said and done, and I get my standardized deduction versus getting my mortgage interest deduction, my property tax deduction, assuming it's a primary home. This one's gonna be about $24, $25. This one's gonna be about $29. So you're picking up immediately $400 to $500 a month, which obviously makes it cheaper on you. Second piece, again, wealth creation. So the average home price in Texas over the past 50 years appreciates by about 5%. I think that's safe. So if you buy a $400,000 house and that house appreciates at 5% a year, that means your equity is going to increase by $20K a year. So let's say you stay in that house for 5 years. That means you'll make about $100,000 in appreciation. So 5 years from now, that $400,000 house will be worth $500,000. So when you sell that property, you would make $100,000 in proceeds. Now you might have some fees, realtor costs, whatever it is, but obviously at the end of the day, let's just call it $85,000 is what you'd walk away with. Plus, you obviously have paid down a little bit of the principal. Not much, maybe 20 grand, 25 grand. But if you stay with rent, you don't pay down any principal. You get very little tax deductions. And the biggest component is you don't get any appreciation on the house. You don't get any return on your investment. You're not gonna make any money that way. Think about it this way. If I said, hey, if you just pay $3,000 a month right now for 5 years, and you never paid down any principal on either, but this asset went up 0, and this asset went up 100K, which one would you take? You would take this one for sure, because you're gonna make 85 to 100 grand and walk away with it. Now, that is a smart investment. It is a good thing to do, but you have to understand real estate and home buying, for the most part, unless you're an investor and a property fixer, the formula to getting rich in this industry and creating wealth is buy and wait, not wait to buy. It's a longer term play. Now, sometimes that longer term play can happen in 3 years. Sometimes it can happen 4 and 5, but over a long period of time, you will make way more money on ownership than you would on renting, especially when rent costs continue to skyrocket with inflation, and it's just costing you more and more and more money every single year. And as long as these institutional investors or individual investors have to pay a premium for the house, have to pay a premium for the rate, they're just gonna pass those costs onto you. So it's not like your rent is gonna continue to drop 10 to 15, 20% every 2 or 3 years. It's gonna stay where it's at, but even if it decreased a tad, there's no return on investment. So that would be part one. Part two, people always say, well, what about the maintenance associated with the property, Brian? Yeah, even if I can pay down the principal and, you know, it's a house to call my own and emotionally I love it and there's a place for me to hang out and paint and let my kids hang out and get it all done, I just don't want to deal with the maintenance. So I say, okay, let's go back to the math. How much maintenance do you really deal with a year on a house? It depends. When you buy a house, you get an inspection. I tell everybody, getting an inspection is kind of like buying a car. You're gonna have a mechanic pop the hood and make sure there's nothing major. If there's a crack in the engine, fix it or walk away. Same component on buying a house. You'll have an inspection done. Hopefully there's no majors. If they are, you either get it fixed, get money for it, or walk away. But let's pretend like you bought a house, you did the inspection, there were no big surprises, everything's all good. I personally have owned my house right now for 7 years. I've probably spent $30,000 in maintenance on stuff. That's paint, that's wood rot, replacing a couple things on an AC, a garage spring, things like that, right? But you have to look at the math. Let's go back to the math and get rid of the emotion. If your house appreciates at 5% a year and you buy a $400,000 house, that means your house will go up 20K every single year. So year one, up 20K. What are the expenses? Let's say you spend $5,000 a year, okay? That means you still net 15. Year two, let's say you spend 5,000 expenses. Okay, you net another 15K, so now you're up 30. Year three, let's say you spend 10K. Okay, you're still up 10, so that way you're up 40. And so rarely are your expenses ever going to exceed the appreciation on a property. So don't think about it that way, which is payment to payment. I don't want the expenses. I promise you, these investors, when you're a renter, they absolutely love you. You are paying into their mortgage. You're contributing to their wealth and their retirement plan. They're watching their property go up 5 or 6% every single year and laughing all the way to the finish line at your expense. And then every time there is an expense, hey, the toilet's broken, $300. Hey, the AC needs XYZ fixed, $800. Hey, it needs a paint on the patio, great. Number one, they're making more money than losing. But two, as an investor, the tax laws for them, they get to deduct some of those expenses as well. So even though they're spending it, they get some of it back. Now on a primary home, from what I know, again, full disclosure, I'm not an accountant, you can't deduct majority of that stuff. So even if you have to take the entire hit, you're still going to make money. So I think as a renter, things are exploding. It's getting expensive. Also, you know, with the population growth and everything in Dallas and the state of Texas, there's not enough inventory to go around. And so because there's not enough inventory, that means everybody can't buy a home. So if everybody can't buy a home, they default back to renting. If they default back to renting, that means there's a lot of renters out there. So when you have a lot of renters and you have a lot of demand, what happens when you have a lot of demand? The price goes up, which means the price of rent's gonna continue to go up as the population grows, and not everybody can get their hands on a house, and you have more renters than homeowners. So I think this is something that you need to take into consideration. So listen, if you're a renter out there and you're just comparing apples to apples and you're doing 3,000 to 3,000, don't think that way. There's a bigger mindset. There's a bigger roadmap. This is what wealthy people and institutional investors want you to do. They want you to think small. They want you to think payment to payment. The landlord loves you. You're taking care of everything for them, paying into their retirement, and again, you're not taking care of yourself. So while renting sometimes is an okay plan for people that cannot afford a home, people that can't get into it, or maybe people that don't have the capacity to truly be a homeowner, rent is okay.